Today, we're going to break down the basic building blocks of any economy. We're talking about business sectors. We'll look at how we get stuff, how we make stuff, and really importantly, who owns the businesses that do it all.
I mean, it can seem incredibly complex, right? But if you really break it down, it all starts with just a few simple categories. By the end of this, you're going to have a really clear framework for understanding how all the pieces fit together. So, let's kick things off at the very beginning of the whole production chain. This first section is all about how we get raw materials out of the ground and turn them into actual physical products.
Okay, so the primary sector is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's step one. Think about any business that's involved in harvesting or pulling natural resources right out of the environment. This is the foundation that everything else is built on. So, we're talking about things we see all the time, like farming and fishing, but this also covers massive operations. And this is a great way to see how even super developed countries can have really strong primary sectors. You know, think about Australia and its world-famous vineyards, or Norway with its huge oil and forestry industries. Now, what's so fascinating here is how this chart basically tells the story of economic development. In countries like Malawi, a huge portion of the workforce is in this primary sector. But as economies start to industrialize, like we've seen in China, that number drops. And it drops dramatically. And then you get to a place like Germany, which industrialized a long time ago, and now has a tiny primary sector workforce. So what's the next step? Well, that brings us to the secondary sector. This is where we take all those raw materials we just talked about and transform them. This is the manufacturing and construction part of the economy, the making things part. Right, so the wood from the forest becomes furniture, the iron ore from a mine becomes a car, and the crude oil gets refined into the gas you put in that car. This sector takes all that raw potential and turns it into the tangible stuff we use every single day. And again, if you look at the data, you see a really clear pattern. China basically became the world's factory, right? It has the largest secondary sector, though even that is starting to shift a bit. But at the same time, you see these big jumps in emerging economies like India and Ghana as they build up their own industries. It's a really key phase in a country's growth. But what happens after a country gets really good at making stuff? Well, that leads us to the third stage of this whole evolution, where the economy isn't dominated by making things anymore, but by doing things for people. And welcome to the tertiary or service sector. This is a massive category. It covers everything from your local coffee shop all the way up to huge global banks. Some people even break this down further into what they call the quaternary sector, which is all about knowledge and information. So think IT, research, and development. The examples here are pretty much what drive the economies of most developed nations today, right? Banking, education, healthcare, retail. It's less about physical products and way more about providing expertise, experiences, and all kinds of support. As you'd probably guess, established economies like the US and Germany are way out in front here with most of their workforce and services. But just look at the growth. Thailand more than doubled its service workforce in less than 30 years. And in a country like Ecuador, it now makes up about half of all jobs. This shift, it's happening everywhere. Okay, so we've sorted businesses by what they produce. They either extract, make, or serve. But there is a completely different way to look at the economy. And it all comes down to one really simple question. Who's in charge? And this brings us to our second major way of categorizing everything. We're shifting gears now from the type of work a business does to the type of ownership. Is the main goal here to make a profit for a few people, or is it to provide a service for everyone? It really just boils down to this fundamental difference in what drives them. On one side, you've got the private sector. These are businesses owned by individuals, and their main goal is profit. On the other side, you've got the public sector, which is owned by the government, and its mission is to provide essential services to all of us. In the private sector, the name of the game is profit. And this could be a single entrepreneur just starting out, a family business, or a massive global corporation. That intense competition forces them to be efficient and innovative. But, and this is key, it also means they have to bear all the financial risk if things go south. The public sector, though, has totally different goals. It's there to provide services that might not be profitable for a private company, like public transit, or to protect industries that are strategically important to a country. And as you can see, this happens at every level, from a city's bus system like Transport for London to a national airline like Caribbean Airlines. But you know, it's not always so black and white. These sectors can, and often do, mix. Singapore Airlines is a perfect example. The government of Singapore is actually the majority shareholder, which means they have influence and get a piece of the profits. But it's also run with the cutthroat efficiency of a private company, thanks to that big chunk of private ownership. Okay, so we've got two different systems for classifying businesses, one based on what they make or do, and one based on who owns them. Let's see how they fit together to give us the full picture of an economy. And here is the single most important takeaway. These aren't separate categories. They're just two different lenses we can use to look at the very same business. Any given business will belong to one of the production sectors and one of the ownership sectors at the same time. This table right here, this is where it all clicks. You can have a private business in the primary sector, like a family vineyard, or you can have a public one, like a state-owned oil company. You can have a private car manufacturer in the secondary sector, and at the same time, a state-run defense contractor. And in the tertiary sector, absolutely. A private bank can operate in the same economy as a city's public bus system. They all exist together. And that pretty much wraps it up. We've mapped out the economy using these two really powerful lenses, what businesses do and who owns them. But as technology like AI starts blurring the lines, turning physical products into services and automating knowledge work, it kind of makes you wonder, right? Will these categories even be enough to describe the future? What could the next business sector possibly look like? Definitely something to think about.